Wow, what a great declaration that, man, we just sing praise to God right here on this earth, right here today. And I pray that, listen, these days are not days where your faith is shriveling. Man, I pray that these are days where your faith is growing, where God's speaking to you, and you're becoming the person that He desires for you to be. I want to talk with you today about this idea of living into your true self. And so I want to ask you this question. Are you living faithfully to the life that God has asked you to live? Are you living faithfully to the life that God has asked you to live? I'm not asking you, are you living to the life that others expect of you? I'm not even asking, are you living faithfully to the life of other people that you might desire? Are you living faithfully to the life that God has asked you to live? There's a famous Hasidic story of a guy named Rabbi Zuzia. Rabbi Zuzia grew to be an old man, and this is what he said. In the coming world, they will not ask me, Rabbi, why were you not Moses? What they will ask me is, Rabbi, why were you not yourself? Whose life is it that you're trying to live? Are you trying to be like Justin and Haley or Kim and Kanye? The life that your parents want for you, is that what you're after? Maybe you're trying to live the life that your family or your friends expect of you. Maybe the one that your boss or the culture demands of you. Maybe you're trying to live this life that you're attempting to shape and kind of craft, and it looks great, like we talked about last week, right? It looks great from the outside, but on the inside, man, you're a mess. Joe DiMaggio was a great baseball player back in the day for the New York Yankees. Many people consider him maybe the greatest Yankee to ever play. He was kind of a larger-than-life sports hero. People stood in line, applauded whenever he would walk into a restaurant or a room. He was kind of like this guy that everybody wanted to be like. He even married one of the most beautiful women on the planet back in his day, Marilyn Monroe. On the outside, smoking Joe DiMaggio, man, he's got it going on. But after his death, a devastating biography of his life was published, and it related in vivid detail how Joe's just managed his image to the nth degree right up until his death at 83 years old. Everything was just kind of smoke and mirrors, hiding that he's very egocentric, competitive, ultra-competitive, greedy, selfish man who's driven by power and money. In the book, The Hero's Life, Joe DiMaggio, The Hero's Life, Richard Ben Kramer details the kind of the flatness of his behind-the-scenes life, the backstage life, his shadow side, right? Not what everybody saw on the outside, but on the inside. And that has led some to even conclude that Joe DiMaggio's life, while famous, was actually both a lie and a tragedy at the same time. Now, what we're learning, what we're on this journey to be is wholehearted, right? In emotionally healthy spirituality, Pete Scazzaro says this: the vast majority of us go to our graves without knowing who we really are. Without being fully aware of it, we live somebody else's life, or at least someone else's expectation for us. Now, last week we talked about this guy named Saul, who was a lot like Joe DiMaggio, right? He was all about image management. On the outside, Saul looks good. He is tall, he is strong, he is handsome, he's choice. But on the inside, remember, he's insecure, he's jealous, he's filled with anger, he's very, very fearful. He's anointed by God and made a new man, but rather than living into his true self, he allowed his life to be ruled by and dominated by the opinions of other people, and by the holes that he had in his heart. Now today we're going to look at a guy who is the exact polar opposite of Saul. We're going to look at Saul's nemesis, a man named David. David was a man who lived with a whole heart. He was a guy who thought, reality is everything. Don't worry about the image. David wasn't perfect by a long shot, let's be real, right? David battled with sin like you battle with sin. David got scared at times. David battled struggled with his faith even at times. But he discovered the secret of loving God and living with a whole heart. And that's really the invitation to you today, right where you're sitting, right there on the couch, in your recliner, driving down the road, sitting on the porch, wherever you are. Here's the invitation, not from me. Come on, in this moment, this is an invitation from God to you, that you would step forward and take this journey toward emotionally healthy spirituality, that you would accept who you are and live true to the person that God created you to be. Now, like last week, we're going to look at a principle, an example, and then a couple walkaways quickly at the end. Here's the principle that I want to lay before you today that I think God wants you to hold on to and build your life on. It's the first step in becoming emotionally healthy. It's to see what God has for you. You have a true self, but it's oftentimes a battle to find it and to live it. You have it, but it's a battle sometimes to find it and to live it. David wrote a lot of the Psalms. A lot of it reveals just his journey toward emotional health and the things going on inside of him. One of the Psalms that he wrote was Psalm 139. It's an awesome psalm. If you've never read it, you need to. You probably will remember these words from it. Psalm 139, beginning in verse 13, says this: God, you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought, put together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. That passage is just very, very strong. In my own devotional reading, I just wrote out in the margin on those verses that God made me personally, particularly, and purposefully. And I know you can't read that, but that's what it says, that God made you personally, particularly, and purposefully. Can we think about that just for a second? That's what this psalm is saying, that God made you personally. You're not here by chance. I'm speaking over you that God made you by his choice. You are God's doing. Remember what Rick Warren wrote in the book, Purpose-Driven Life? There are accidental parents. You didn't plan to be a parent, but there are no accidental children. Every child is God's gift. And that's what David's saying. David is saying, God, you formed me. I'm your creation. And because you are his creation, God loves you more than you could ever possibly know. You see, true freedom comes when we no longer need to be special in everybody else's sight, because you already know that you are special in God's sight. You've been made personally by God, and you're deeply loved by him. You're made particularly. David says, you formed me. I'm fearfully and I'm wonderfully made. I'm skillfully wrought, put together, right? God's done this. This is what David's saying. God did not put him together on an assembly line, and he didn't put you together on an assembly line. There's not a heavenly assembly line that says, okay, we're making all men today. All right, we're making all tall today. All right, we're making all strong today. That's not the way it works. God specifically, uniquely, David says, has put us together. You've been declared a one of a kind. And listen, science backs that up. I read an article this week that's called The Other Fingerprints You Don't Know About. We all know that our fingerprints are unique, but you have other parts of your body that are equally unique compared to everybody else in the world. You're a one of a kind. In this article, it says that your ears, the shape of them and size of them, that your ears are so unique just to you. You could be identified by your ears. Your tongue and your taste buds are unique to you. Your iris and the retina in your eye are unique to you. Your gait, the way you walk, is unique to you. Your DNA, all of that is unique to you. Your facial structure. How are you opening up your iPhone these days? It's facial recognition. Unless you're my mama, she's still rocking that iPhone 4. Come on, you're bringing it strong, mama. I hear you. Right? She's holding on. Right? But it's facial recognition because you are unique. Nobody else can get into your phone. It's your face alone that can open up that phone. Now, if God took time and the energy to make you unique, come on, think with me. If God took time and energy to make you unique, don't you think that he wants you then to live in that uniqueness? That's what David is blown away by. That God made me as I am, and personally, particularly, just like this. And God made you purposefully. David said, God's got a plan. He knows all my days. Before I even got here, he already knew them. God had already numbered. It's not just the number, please listen. It's not just the number of his days, but the purpose of those days that are numbered. David in his lifetime had many jobs. Think about it. He's a shepherd. He's a singer. He's a songwriter. He's a soldier, and he ultimately became king. Many jobs, one purpose. And that one purpose was to honor God and glorify God through his whole life. That's what the Bible says over in Acts chapter 13. It says David served the purposes of God in his generation, and then he died. There's a lot of stuff David did do and could do, but the one thing that he lived his life for was the purpose of God. And God has a purpose for you. God put you here to do a certain number of things in these number of days that you have. Now, I know some of y'all are like that dude who said, man, right now I'm so far behind, I may never die if I'm supposed to get all that done, right? But this is a New Testament teaching. Ephesians 2:10 says this, you are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works which God prepared beforehand, long before you were ever born. And long before you even were recreated in Christ, God had already got a purpose for you that you would walk in them. God has something for you to do while you're here on this earth. A guy named Parker Palmer in a book called Let Your Life Speak says, your vocation, what you're supposed to do with your life, it does not come from a voice out there somewhere calling you to do something like that I'm not, calling you to become something I'm not. It comes from a voice in here calling you to be the person that you were born to be, to fulfill the original selfhood given to you at the time that you were born and created by God. See, God has given you this high calling to know him and be the person that he created you to be. So would you just stop with me? Can we just stop right here just for a second and let that sink in? All right, put your phone down if you're on Instagram right now. What we're hearing is that God loved you and he made you and he has a purpose for you. Would you think about that just for a second? Forget what every voice in your head has ever told you. Forget what every other person who's ever wounded you has said. Forget what your lack of likes or follows is telling you. God is telling you right now he loves you, he made you, and he has a purpose for your life. Now, it's a battle to find that and then to live that out. But God's offering you that opportunity today. Too often times, whenever we begin even to think about this life that God calls us to, we find ourselves having resistance, right? Our desires, our opinions, the expectation of other people try to shape you into becoming someone or something other than what God has designed you to be. And the fact is, you've got a very real enemy who tempts you to go against God's design and purpose for your life and do things and live your life in ways that are not from God. Do it your own way. Suit your own self-centered desires, he whispers. Remember when Jesus was baptized, that there was a voice from heaven, right? In Matthew 3:17, it says, and behold, a voice came out of the heavens and said, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Jesus in this moment is publicly stepping forward in his uniqueness as God's Son. He knows it, but he's now publicly stepping forward saying, I've been uniquely made, deeply loved, specifically purposed. That's what that voice from heaven was saying. That's my beloved Son. In this one, I am well pleased. But that identity came immediately under attack, right? The temptation of Jesus is the very next thing that happens. And the enemy says to him, now, if you really are the Son of God, right? The temptation was for Jesus to not live in his true self as the beloved Son of God and fulfill his mission and purpose. So the enemy comes at him and he offers him some temptations. He said, if you really are the Son of God, remember the first temptation? Hey, why don't you're hungry, hadn't eaten in 40 days. Why don't you command these stones and they'll turn into bread? Jesus, come on, you know you're hungry, bro. Your stomach's growling, man. You're about to blow away, right? Skinny as a rail. Come on, just use your power, use your identity for your own pleasure. And I think that's a temptation that all of us face at times. Will you live your life denying self to live for God, or will you just be self-indulgent? Temptation 2, right? Jesus resists the first one. So temptation 2 was jump off the temple. You know God's going to send the angels to catch you, Psalm 91, right? And Jesus, whenever that happens, bro, you talk about blowing up. Man, people will know your name, bro. You're going to be famous. Everybody's going to know you. You're going to have a blue check mark by your name. I mean, that's the temptation, Jesus. You could be well known. And yet Jesus resists the temptation because he said, I didn't come to be praised by men. I came to be pleasing to one person. And that's my Father. Temptation number 3 was, okay, Jesus, here's the deal. Man, if you're down with this, if this is really what you're going to do, then if you really want all the kingdoms, if you want the power on the earth again, if you'll just bow down to me, I'll give it to you, right? That's the temptation of the enemy toward him. And the enemy could have given it to him. It was a temptation to have a shadow mission. Jesus was on a mission to take back the power and the authority of the enemy. But the enemy's now tempting him to do the right thing the wrong way. Jesus, you don't have to suffer, bruh. You ain't got to go through all that stuff. Man, if you'll just take this shortcut, mission accomplished. Now, here's what I'm going to say to you. And you know Jesus resisted that temptation too. But there's this battle that he's facing. Come on, you're facing that battle too. If you're going to try to live in your true self, the person that God created you to be, then I'm convinced that you're going to face opposition from the world, from the devil, and from your own self at times because you're broken and sinful. But here's the good news, you can do it. And here's the example of a man who did. The guy we're going to look at today, his name is David, right? David is a man who was true to himself even when nobody else believed. David models for us that it can be done. We're going to be looking at 1 Samuel 17. If you have a Bible, you can follow along right there in 1 Samuel chapter 17. This is a famous story that you're going to know. All right, but I want to kind of set the stage because a lot of you are watching different parts of our community and state, nation, and world, and I don't want to take for granted that you already know this story. So here's the deal. A guy named Saul is king over Israel. David's a little shepherd boy out in the pasture at the moment. The Philistines are the Israelites' arch enemy, and they've gathered up to battle against the Philistines. And so all the Israelite soldiers are on one hill, and all the soldiers of the Philistines are on the other hill. And this huge giant guy, 9 feet tall, from the Philistines, he's their champion. He would walk down into the valley every day, and he would say, I defy the armies of Israel. Just send one guy to fight me. And if I win, y'all will serve us. But if you win, we'll serve you guys, right? It was a battle to the death. Only one person was going to have to die. And so that was the deal. He does this 40 straight days. And every day, whenever he would walk down and make this challenge, 1 Samuel 17:11 says this, when Saul and all Israel heard these words of this Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now, track with me for just a second. Saul is uniquely made, deeply loved, purposefully called to be king, and yet his life is being ruled in this moment by fear and dismay. And it's not just him, it's all Israel with him. Can I just say to you right now that people who learn to live according to their true God-given self, you're in the minority. You're in the minority. One day David comes to the battlefield at about the time that that Goliath is making this great challenge, and he begins to ask a question. Verse 26, David spoke to the men who were standing by him, and he said, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine, takes away the reproach from Israel? Man, he's messing with us. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Let me translate that for you. Who's this dude who's not in covenant with our God? Who does this guy think he is that he's going to taunt the armies of the living God? Now, listen, David is a different cat. You're about to see how different he really is. He sees with different eyes. He sees his life and all of his circumstances from a spiritual perspective. Come on, can I talk to the men of Pinelake for a moment? That God is calling you to see your life and your circumstances and everything about you from a spiritual perspective. From the flesh, all anybody could see was the size of that big old giant down there in the valley. But from the perspective of faith, all David could see was the size of my God, and this ain't no problem. Come on, that's the call of God on your life and on my life right now. Verse 28, David's oldest brother hears him. So Eliab, his oldest brother, heard him when he had spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David. Why? Because Eliab's embarrassed. He's ashamed. He's not been fighting. And now here's David asking questions. He said, why have you come down? Who'd you leave those few sheep with in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart. You've come down here just to see the battle, boy. And just like that, the battle for his true self begins. You see, Big Brother just became chief critic. And he starts to criticize David and say things about him to put David in his place. And it's not the first time either. Verse 29, David says, hey, what have I done now? Emphasis on now. It's not the first time Big Brother's tried to put him in his place. Hey, wasn't I just asking a question? Anybody got a brother like that? Sister like that? Friend like that, bully at school like that, always trying to put you in your place, a critic who always tries to diminish you, belittle you, make false accusations, question your motives, sow seeds of slight. Come on, we all got them. And God's saying to you, listen, if you're going to be true to your true self, you're going to have to be relentless. Be relentless. Don't be deterred by the voices of your critics. Saul somehow heard that there was somebody in the camp who might be willing to go down there and fight Goliath. So he said, hey, bring him to me. And it's David. And David said, Saul, I got this. Verse 33, Saul looks at him and says to him, hey, you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him. Look, you're just a youth. You're just a kid, man. This dude's been a warrior since he was, just a small youth. Now, Saul already has been introduced to David in the previous chapter. Whenever Saul would be troubled and battle with depression, David would come in and play music for him. So all Saul can see is this sawed-off little, young man who plays the harp, and he's going to go fight Goliath. That is not happening. The battle's intensifying to David. Is he really going to be true to himself? His boss is saying, bro, you ain't got the experience. Man, you don't have what it takes. This guy's going to eat you alive. Come on, you ever heard that? You ever heard that voice in your own head? You ever had somebody say that to you? You don't have what it takes. You ain't going to make it. Verse 34, but David said to Saul, no, your servant was tending his father's sheep when a lion or a bear would come and take a lamb from the flock, and I would go after him and attack him. Come on, David is a different cat. If you was the shepherd, you would be like, oh, my bad. That one got away, right? Circle of life. Circle of life, that's what you would say. But not David. He said, man, I would go and I would rescue it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I'd seize him by his beard and I struck him and I killed him. He said, your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine, he's going to be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God. Again, do you see it? David's not looking at it like everybody else sees it from the flesh. He's seeing this opposition from the eyes of faith. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. You see, David's saying, bro, you must not know about me, and I know you don't know about my God, because there ain't nobody and no thing that my God cannot handle. Last week, we had learned about this guy named Saul, right, who lacked a personal relationship with God. Everything about his spiritual life was secondhand. He got everything from Samuel. He didn't have a personal relationship with God. And yet David, right now, what you're learning is he's the exact opposite. He and God are like this, man. They're close. They're connected. And so David sees all of his life as an opportunity to just show how awesome God is. This giant ain't nothing but a thing when God's on your side. Can I say that over you? The Pinelake family, this is my prayer for you, is that we would all individually and then collectively have a faith in God that is so huge that no matter what you're facing, you would have the mindset that says, whenever God's on my side, this ain't nothing but a thing. I'm going to be true to God. Man, I pray that for you. I pray it for people that I don't know. I pray it for my family that's watching right now. I pray this for us. May we have eyes of faith to be true to who God has created you to be. The battle gets you to walk away from your true self is relentless, and now it turns kind of through the back door. Saul says to David, all right, bro, if you're going to go do this, man, if you're going to go do this, then you got to look the part. You got to be dressed up like a warrior. So Saul dresses David in his own armor, right? So David's going to put on Saul's armor. Now remember, Saul is the tallest guy in the whole nation. He is head and shoulders taller than everybody else. And David's probably the perfect height, 5'9". And so whenever all this stuff is on top of him, David is just like, man, I can't walk in this. I've not tested this stuff. So he takes it off. He takes off that armor. And he's laying down the expectation that Saul had. Man, that warriors wear warrior gear. Goliath is expecting a warrior to come and meet him. But please hear me. What Saul wanted him to wear wasn't true to who God had made David to be. David had learned to walk with God and fight for God, wearing the garb and the stuff that God had revealed to him. And he said, you know what? I'm either going to be me or I won't be at all. And so he's just determined to be his true self. He's refusing to wear this armor. He's refusing to take on a false identity. He chooses to stand and fight from his true sense of true self, who God made him to be. And can I say to you, when you live in your true identity in Jesus, the person you were created to be, you don't let the world squeeze you into its mold. Come on, I'm talking to somebody right now. Because there's something inside of you which longs to be this person, and yet this battle is so real for you. You feel the pressure to live a certain kind of life, to have a certain kind of job when you get out of college, to have a certain type of education, or live in a particular place, or drive a particular kind of vehicle, or dress a certain way, or look a certain way. Can I just tell you that is not the way to live your life? And you're tempted to compromise and just go along to be what everybody expects you to be. Or you rebel against it and just say, I'm not going to do anything that anybody expects me to be. And so you just dress weird, you act weird, you do weird things, right? You do stuff to your body, and you're trying to be different. Can I just speak a word over you? You are different, and you are unique, and you are loved, and you are accepted already the way God created you to be. You just be you, because nobody else can be. You want to stand out? You just be you. Whose armor do you need to take off right now? Come on, what false expectations have been put on you by your mom and your daddy? What false expectations by your culture? Come on, you think that if you go to college, you have to have a certain profession, and I'm just speaking over some of you. Listen, God created you and wired you to be you, not your daddy. And can I speak to some daddies and mamas? Would you just quit putting pressure on your kid to be a certain person that you want them to be, and would you help them to know who God created them to be? Help them discover that. That verse in Proverbs, it says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's older, he won't depart from it. Can I tell you what that really means? It doesn't mean you pound religion into them so that they'll get it. Here's what that word means. It means that your job is to train them up into the thing and the person that God created them to be. And then when they get older, they won't hate their job, but they stay at it because they get well paid. It means that they will begin to live the purpose of God and feel the pleasure of God because they know that they are loved, uniquely made, and purposefully called. Come on, this is a breakthrough for many of us. And it's a battle for us. And if you persist, the battle becomes even more overt and hostile. The haters begin to be revealed. Verse 41 in 1 Samuel 17 says this, then the Philistine came on, so he's now about to go fight Goliath. The Philistine comes on and he approaches David with his shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked at and saw David, he disdained him. He's insulted, for he's but a youth and ruddy with a handsome appearance. And the Philistine said to David, man, am I a dog? You come out here to me with sticks. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine also said to David, come here, boy, and I'm going to give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field. Now, as much as I can tell, this may be the first time in the Bible there's smack talk, right? Goliath is talking noise to David, but that's what Goliaths do. That's what giants do. They try to make you fearful and intimidate you to keep you from being your true self. My small group was doing this study on emotionally healthy spirituality. We're in the midst of it, and one of the study guide questions right here is, hey, what do you think David felt? You ever thought about that? Come on, I'm talking to some people. Y'all read this story 100,000 times, but have you ever stopped to think, what was David feeling over the course of these events? And as I thought about it and just thought about humanity and how we are, I just thought, you know what? I bet David felt wounded maybe by his brother and certainly rejected. I wonder if he felt insulted and intimidated. I wonder if he felt mad and fearful and doubtful and worried. Come on, he's just a man like you and me. I think it's likely that he felt all those things because David is a guy who's so in touch with his emotions. Come on, have you read the Psalms? Come on, my boy could party like crazy, man. He could lift up a hallelujah and worship and praise and celebrate like a champ. But he was also prone to just tell God, I'm dying, God. I'm so mad at you right now, I could spit and wilt the grass. God, I'm so angry at you because you're not doing what I want you to do. Listen, David is in touch with his feelings, but he's not ruled by his feelings. And I think that in these moments, David probably hears some things. He knows how they're landing on him, but because he's wholehearted, he can stand and keep being true to himself. We're going to talk more in the coming weeks about what do you do with your feelings and your emotions, but for today, I just want to say to you that you have them, and you need to learn to pay attention to them, identify them, listen to them a little bit, learn from them, but don't live by them. Learn what they're telling you, But you surrender your feelings to your faith and let God begin to grow you and speak to you even through what you're feeling. To be true to yourself, you're going to have to battle against these voices, these critics, these doubters, these haters, even your own emotions that speak into your mind. David did, but here's the deal. It's a battle you can win. And I got to be honest with you, it's a battle that I find myself having fought and still fighting in my own life at two levels, professionally and personally. I just know what it is to try to want to live this true self and yet feel like, man, these other voices are just trying to make me to become somebody that I'm really not. I've got my own critics and haters and doubters, some real, some imagined. People have said that I'm too this way or not enough that way. I've been called heartless, weak, ignorant, and arrogant, and I've been all those things at times. And my tendency is to go one of two ways in my flesh. It's either to wilt under that and think, oh my God, I'm such a loser, or it's to bow up and say, bro, you can kiss my foot, right? Come on, y'all know what I'm saying? That's in my flesh. That's what I want to do. I want to rise up and respond emotionally, but neither of those extremes is healthy. God's trying to teach me how to hear it, but not let it land on me. Take what's worthwhile, but let go. As a friend says, like eating watermelon, you take what's good and you spit out the seeds. I'm trying to learn to do that. Even today, I still got those voices. Being in lockdown, right? I've been watching not just our church services, I've been watching other guys' church services too, other churches. And there's this voice that comes in my head and says, oh, you're not good enough. You're not deep enough in your teaching. You're not relevant enough in your style. Man, if you're going to really be relevant in this culture, you're going to have to get you some change like Stephen Furtick and learn how to sing and write songs. Or if you're going to be cool in this culture, you're going to have to get a haircut and a leather jacket like Carl Lentz. Or if you're going to be strong in this culture, I got to get some biceps and content like Craig Rochelle. All right, now some of y'all don't know who that is, but some of y'all know exactly what I'm talking about, right? I'm just telling you that's a real battle in my head. Now, I'm trying to be strong and just be true to myself for two reasons. That ship has sailed. I ain't young like them brothers. And my wife has threatened me, if I get me some chains, I'm in trouble, right? But I'm just telling you it's a real battle to stay true to just who I am and trust that God's got that. But then personally, it's also a struggle to be true to who God's made me to be and learning what that means to be true to who I am, even in my closest relationship. My marriage is better, it's stronger, it's deeper than it ever has been today, but I'm convinced that that's because of the patience of my wife and God teaching me to be true to who He's made me to be, to not ignore or skip over and past the feelings that I have on the inside, and then whenever I know I'm feeling something, to be able to verbalize that and to speak that out and to own it in a way that is helpful and not hurtful. It's uncomfortable to me at times, and it creates tension that I'd rather not have, but it's true. Who wants to say to your wife, you know, I'm struggling, I'm worried about something, I'm unsettled, I disagree, right? In a healthy way. None of us want to do that. But what I'm finding is that the more I can be known, naked and not ashamed, accepted, that it enables me to be my true self. That, yeah, my wife and other people, they have opinions and ideas, but you know what? I'm learning to differentiate that from who I am because of what He says. And I can listen and I can glean, but I can also let go. And I can let you have your attitude, your opinion, your feelings. And yet I can also be me in the midst. David responds to the giant in verse 45. David says to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I'm coming at you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you've taunted. This day the Lord's going to deliver you up into my hands. I'm going to strike you down and remove your head from you. I'm going to give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give it into your hands. I think this is kind of David's gladiator moment. Fellas, y'all know what I'm talking about? Maximus. First time, right? He's fighting in Rome in the Colosseum, and he wins the battle, and the weak emperor comes down and says, hey, why doesn't the gladiator take off his helmet and reveal his true identity, right? And he turns his back and he says, slave, don't turn your back on me. So Maximus takes off his helmet, and then he drops this. My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the north, general of the Felix Legion, loyal servant to the true emperor, Marcus Aurelius. I'm the husband of a murdered wife. I'm the father of a murdered son, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. Come on, somebody better fan me right now, right? You know what I'm saying? Come on, fellas, y'all know what I'm saying? When you see that, it's just like, bam, yes, yes. This guy knows who he is. Commodus ain't got any idea who he is. But fellas, this is what God is saying to you. Ladies, this is what God is calling you to do, is to be like David, to say, you know what, I see all this, but I serve a God who has uniquely loved me and made me and called me, and I am not afraid to be true to who God's called me to be. David killed that giant. Oh yeah, he ran down in that valley, got his slingshot, took him a stone, and whack, right upside the head. Knocked Goliath out, took the Goliath's sword and cut his head off, and he brought a great deliverance that day for the nation of Israel. Look, we can praise. We can praise God that there's not a giant that you'll ever face that God can't help you overcome. But here's what I want you to hear, is that David in this moment is really a foreshadowing of his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson, Jesus, who came from obscurity and took his place on a battlefield, and he beat 3 undefeated rulers on this planet: sin, death, and Satan. And he took all the power of all 3 so that you could be free to live in your true self, created by God. That's who he wants you to be. And listen, if you've never said to God, forgive me, come into my life, change me, I want to follow you, I want to be this person you've created me to be, just ask him right now. Just simply say, God, that's my prayer. Take my life. I give it to you. Now we're out of time, but here are the walkaways very quickly. If you're going to start living according to your true self, 2 things. Number 1, you're going to have to learn to spend time alone with God. There's no other way. There's no other shortcut. You've got to learn to spend time alone with God. Henry Nouwen wrote, solitude is the furnace of transformation. Without solitude, we remain victims of our society and we continue to be entangled in the illusions of our false self. Solitude is the place of great struggle and the great encounter. The struggle against the compulsions of the false self and the encounter with the loving God who offers himself as the substance of your new self and your new life. You see, silence and solitude, what I'm saying is you're going to have to learn to be still and be alone with God. This is the foundational element of you becoming emotionally healthy, spiritual person. Come on, Moses, David, Jesus, all spent time alone, hearing from God, getting their true self from God so that they could live that true self in front of the world. Can I just say to you that COVID-19 has slowed us down? And I know the world's cranking back up, but I ask you, don't waste the slowdown. Don't waste the time that God is even allowing you right now. Don't fill your days with Netflix and movies and stuff like that. Don't just fill it up with other activities. You find a place and a time to sit and to be still before God and read the Word and pray and listen, and you let God call you into your true self that He's made you to have. That's where I believe faith and confidence grow and come from, in the secret place with God. We're going to learn more about this in a couple of weeks. But come on, would you just begin to say to God, I want to spend time with you. Set a reminder on your phone, but you begin to spend time with God. Here's the second thing. You're going to have to get okay with disappointing people. Now, I know that doesn't sound very spiritual, but if you're going to be true to yourself, you're going to have to get over what other people think about you. Come on, David disappointed his brother, Saul, Goliath. He's disappointing everybody, but he just doesn't care. He's being true to himself. Jesus disappointed a whole lot of people. He disappointed his mama and them. At one point, they thought he had lost his mind. He disappointed all of his hometown people. They tried to kill him and push him off a cliff. He disappointed his disciples and Mary and Martha whenever he didn't raise Lazarus or didn't heal Lazarus. He's disappointing the crowd whenever they wanted a Messiah that would deliver them from their earthly pains and give them food and bread every day. And yet Jesus was like, I'm not doing that. I don't live for you. I live for an audience of one. And so you're going to have to get okay with not being what everybody else wants you to be. You don't have to be mean, but don't give in. People might not like it, but they will get over it. You let the humility that Christ reveals to you in the secret place be the strength and the grace that you live. You live differentiated and yet knowing that I'm going to disappoint some people. Dr. Caroline Leaf has written a lot of books that my wife has found helpful, particularly. I've listened to her a little bit too. She had this quote recently. It says this: "The version of me you created in your mind is not my responsibility." Come on, there are going to be a lot of people who've got a plan for you, and that ain't your responsibility. Would you just let them have whatever they think? You live for an audience of one. I read this story recently. I've heard it in various forms, and I'll close with it today. It's in this book, The Song of the Bird. Tony DeMello tells the story about this man who found an eagle's egg, and he took it and he put it in his hen house. And so the hen sat on the egg, and it eventually hatched along with the other little chicken eggs. And so the eagle just learned to grow up as a chicken, scratching around in the yard, digging up worms, eating a little corn, flap its wings every now and then just to fly into the coop. And so it just lived its life that way. One day, whenever he was old, he looked up in the sky and he saw this bird that was majestic and just floating on the wind, wings spread out. And he said, "Who is that?" And his chicken neighbor said, "Oh, that's the eagle. That's the king of the air. He rules the air, but we're of the ground. We just eat down here." And so the eagle put his head back down, and he just kept living like a chicken because he thought that's what he was. Can I just say to you, God didn't make you a chicken. He didn't make you a chicken. And I know that's a silly story, but I'm being serious with you. He did not make you to be like everybody else. He made you to rise. He called you to live a true self life. And that's His offering to you right now. And so could I ask you that question again? Are you living faithfully to the life that Christ called you to live? Because today would be a great day to start. I'm going to say a very short prayer. It's going to be one sentence long, actually. And then we're going to sing a song, right? And I pray that it's more than a song, and please don't jump off the feed, right? Don't leave church yet. It's a song that just says, "I am who He says I am." And I want it to become your prayer. I want it to become your words where you say to God, "I am chosen. I am not forsaken. I am who you say I am." And you be true to yourself that God's called you to be. Come on, would you pray with me? Just close your eyes right now, bow your head, and let this prayer become your prayer. Jesus, would you come and invade me with your burning fire and spirit so that I might become the person you created me to be. In Jesus' name, amen.